This sounds so crazy. I can't believe I'm saying this on camera. Today, we're talking to Natasha Mahtani, who is a life coach and divorce coach and has been featured in just about every big publication you can imagine.
I do the divorce part really because I just want to hold space for all the people who feel like they can't leave. Because money is something that people find so difficult to talk about. I've had clients who've been married for 15 years and struggle to have a conversation about money.
So you've said something there that I was like, oh my God, I want to know about that.
I'm very British and patriotic, and it really breaks my heart that we've got to a point where this phenomenal country is really on its knees and there's people leaving in droves. We never actually saw what marriage looked like because all the movies end when they get married. I am worried for the next generation of boys. When you're in a relationship with someone, there's like 4 of you. It's like you, your partner, and then your 2 phones because it's such a distraction.
Never thought I would say that term. The grassroots sex workers. Okay, you're an expert in life and relationships. Fix me, I'm broken. Now I'm at a point where I'm bored and I'm lost because I don't have any problems to fix, but I don't know what's going to get me out of bed tomorrow. Welcome to the show where we talk to successful people about the bits you don't see. Today, we're talking to Natasha Mahtani, who is a life coach and divorce coach and has been featured in just about every big publication you can imagine. Natasha, how are you doing?
Good, thanks Callum. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for coming on for a slightly different episode today. Obviously, we're going to be speaking about you and what you've got going on, but we're going to flip the script a little bit and we're going to be speaking a little bit more about me. So, sort of looking forward to it, sort of a little bit. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about your story.
Gosh, where do I begin? As I was telling you earlier off camera, this is my 8th country. So I've lived all around the world. About 12 years ago, I experienced divorce. At the time, I was a life coach, and I just found there was so many people reaching out to me and asking me questions and, asking me whether they should leave and what they should do. So I did some training in the UK and became an accredited divorce coach.
That's the thing.
That is a thing.
Right.
But the more that I started coaching people who had experienced divorce, the more I realized that if people had a relationship coach, they really wouldn't need to get divorced. And I'd always say, I'm Natasha, the divorce coach that doesn't want anyone to get divorced. And I was like, wait a minute, let me retrain.
Do both.
And do both. Well, I do the divorce part really because I just want to hold space for all the people who feel like they can't leave. And really that's why I do that. But my focus is on relationships because I just think that with the right support, everyone should be thriving far more than they probably are.
Right, I'm going to get straight into it. What do you mean can't leave? I, as a, white man that, is 30 years old, I don't understand the can't leave thing.
Yeah.
Talk to me about can't leave.
And that's a great question. So the biggest reason a lot of women can't leave is money. That's all it comes down to. And I'm not necessarily talking about people who are, in their 20s or in their early 30s and who are all working. But once you have children, and if a lot of women choose to stay at home or be stay-at-home mums, which there's like these memes on Instagram that show that apparently they should be paid $280,000 because the kind of job and the work it takes to raise kids is huge. But they don't set themselves up in a way that protects them. And then all of a sudden they're in a situation and they're like, I've been out of the workforce for maybe 10 years, or even if I'm still working, I've been working part-time, or I don't have my own business, and the control then sits with the man. So there's a lot of people who just say I can't leave because, and I met someone at a party when I was living in Lagos, and she said to me, and it was clear that she needed to leave her marriage, and she was like, I'm just going to wait 5 years because if I leave, he won't pay the boarding school fees. And her kids were in boarding school in the UK, and it's like 50,000-60,000 pounds, annually. And she's like, he won't pay it. He'll do that to hold it against me, and so I'm just going to stay until they're done with their education. So yeah. And then the second part of not wanting to leave is just maybe worrying what people will think. And that's a cultural thing. So you don't have that, as you said, white man in your 30s. You don't tend to have that in the West as much as you have that in Southeast Asia, Africa. But it still does exist.
So I'm going to come on to that stuff a bit later on because I'm really interested in that, because it's just like you see the TV programs and it's like, is it actually like that? But yeah, before we go on to that, what's the counter to I can't leave? How do you solve that?
So in terms of what they should start doing, first of all, if you see that there are kind of some issues in your relationship, seek the help of a relationship coach or a therapist or someone, because I think that a lot of people think that, oh no, but we love each other and we're together and and so we can fix this. And I was like, it's a bit like you play golf, right? If you weren't particularly good at golf, you would I'm sure you are. You would have no qualms about being like, you know what, just a couple of times a week or a couple of times a month, I'm going to go and get myself a coach just to show me. Same if you're a tennis player, and any pro tennis player, Serena Williams, she won't be like, oh, I'm a pro. I've been playing since I was like 4 years old. Therefore, I don't need a coach. Like, I've got this. Yeah. But somehow, when it comes to relationships, people just think, we've got this. We should be able to fix this on our own. So that's the first thing I would suggest someone do. If you are a woman and you feel like you're in that situation where you don't, you're not set up financially or whatever, start to get your ducks in a row. Like, it could be that you have a conversation about money, and we'll come on to that because money is something that people find so difficult to talk about. I've had clients who've been married for 15 years and struggle to have a conversation about money. And they've got 15 years of marriage and 3 children, and they still struggle to have a conversation about money. So I think getting your ducks in a row, having the conversation with your partner to think about how you can set things up so that if you are a stay-at-home parent, you still have your own little, almost like nest egg. Learning about investing, that's the other thing. A lot of women are like, oh, and even women who work will often be like, oh yeah, I just got this bonus and I gave it to my husband to invest. And I'm like, why? Yeah. Like, you can do this. You're actually much better at investing, more than you think you are, basically. And so I think almost like empowering women, and I don't want to say just women, men as well, because, I really do feel in the whole like kind of movement towards like empowering women, sometimes men are getting left behind, and I think it's really important that doesn't happen. But to be perfectly honest, most of the time the clients that are coming to me are women, because I think the control when it comes to finance still, for the most part, very much lies with a man.
That makes sense. So you've said something there that I was like, oh my God, I want to know about that. From an expert, somebody that knows about it. Yeah. How do you think the kind of uprising of women in kind of going to work more, rather than like go back 50 years, 100 years or whatever, the woman stays at home, cooks, does all that sort of stuff. There's a lot more women that are having higher power jobs and all these things. Maybe the balance of, men and women, sometimes the man's the stay-at-home person now. How do you think that affects relationships?
Yeah, that is changing relationships quite a bit. There's a really interesting guy who studied gender for a long time. His name is Richard Reeves. And he said on a podcast that he was on recently that the reason him and his wife ended up in relationship counseling was because she said to him one day, it's not that you're not enough of a feminist, it's not that you're not man enough. And he was just like, what?
That's my fear with this.
Yeah, and I think sometimes there's this idea that if you want to be a feminist and support women, you should just let them make all the choices. So he'd often say to her, where would you like to go for lunch? Like, what would you like to do? Like, giving her the onus. And actually, we need to think about like masculine and feminine energy from a biological standpoint, and that's as important because we can't essentially change who we are. So I don't think there's anything wrong with a couple who have had a conversation where maybe the man decides that he's going to be a stay-at-home parent and she's going to go out and work. But I think the biggest thing is just talking about it. Like, you can't over-talk something like this. Because otherwise you leave so much to assumption, and that's where the problems start. So communication, although I wouldn't say communication is key, comprehension is key. Because people think, oh, just communication is key. I'm like, you can communicate until the cows come home, but if you're not understanding what I'm saying, or I'm not speaking in a way that lands with you, then, we're not really communicating.
That makes sense. So you mentioned biology there. Do you think that this kind of new movement, genders are biologically aligned to, or do you think that they're moving away from their biological alignment with, women taking a step up and men maybe taking a step back?
I don't know if they're changing their biology. I think they're changing their preferences. So I think people...
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, it would be hard to change biology. Yeah, but, are we...
Some people think you can.
Well, yeah. Oh, God, yeah, yeah.
But
Go on.
yeah, no, I think it, there's certain things that are natural with certain, in my opinion, with certain genders. There's certain things that are just natural, and I think that just because you change your preferences of the way you want to do things, that doesn't mean that changes. So biologically, men are natural caretakers, right? They want to be able to step up and take care of their partner and protect them and those sort of things. And women are like natural nurturers. And so I think if a woman's going out to work, she would still do that in her own way in her workspace, and he would do that in his own way at home if he was staying at home. But it doesn't. They're just kind of changing their roles a little bit, as opposed to what their natural tendencies are.
That makes a lot of sense. Right, a little bit more about you. So let's go all the way back. Go back as young as you can and talk me through your life until today.
How much time do you have?
You can do 10 minutes on this bit.
So I was born in Monrovia in West Africa. So it's the capital of Liberia, which is the country that was essentially created by the U.S. to send freed slaves back to. And I was born there, and when I was about 3.5, civil war was breaking out. And so my family decided to move back to the U.K. My dad was from the U.K. and my grandparents lived there, so we moved there. But the 80s, I'm totally giving away my age. The 80s in the UK, especially for immigrants with Margaret Thatcher and stuff, was quite a difficult time. So we were there for 3.5 years. And then when I was 7, my mum still had a lot of family in West Africa, but in Nigeria. And they were like, there's great opportunity in Nigeria for business. My family's quite entrepreneurial, so they were like, come to Nigeria. So at 7, I moved to Nigeria, to Lagos. And then when I was 11, my parents wanted me to have a bit of the Indian culture. And so I went to boarding school in India for 3 years. And then when I was...
Why?
I think, it was a few things. The education system in Nigeria wasn't as, I guess, as robust as they would have liked it. And they thought, well, it would be good for you to get some of the culture because you don't speak the language and don't really know much about the culture. And India actually is known for its boarding schools. They have a lot of international boarding schools. The hill station that I went to school, there was 19 boarding schools in like a 2-mile radius. Wow. Yeah, huge. Lots of international students from everywhere, from like Indonesia, the UK, the US, parts of South and Central Africa. So I went to boarding school for 3 years. And then when I got to 14, they thought, okay, well, we think you should finish off your education in Europe, but in an English-speaking country. So it was either England or Ireland. And my dad had been to Ireland a few years previously. He thought the Irish were very friendly, a bit like the Scots. Yeah. And so we went to... And also, they said the education system at the time was higher. So even, for example, you didn't have to sit A-levels, which was only 3 subjects. You sat the Leaving Certificate, which was, 6 or 7 subjects. So at 14, I ended up in Ireland, which was like a huge culture shock, as you can imagine. And it's not Ireland the way it is today. Dublin today is a lot like London is, very cosmopolitan. Back then, this was like sort of 1997. It was very different. Is
that Troubles time? Or is it, I don't know where my kind of history order is, but was that when the Troubles were happening?
So there weren't really troubles happening then. I think it was after that, but it was still. I got called exotic all the time. Let's just say that. It was still pretty racist. My brother and I were one of 2 of 4 children in the school that were, brown. So it was a very, very different time. But, one of my best friends is Irish to date, and I did enjoy it. So I was there for 4 years. And then I moved back to London for university and worked there for a few years. And then I spent some time traveling and volunteering, got married ridiculously young, and ended up moving to Asia. And I lived between Hong Kong and Taiwan. And then, moved back to London, spent some time in Lagos in the last couple of years, and now moved to the UAE. So
nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Country.
Where's your favourite?
Even with all its troubles, I think London. Yeah.
Why?
I think.
I know we spoke about this a little bit before, but why?
Believe it or not, I actually don't mind the weather there. I actually like the fact that in the summer you can be out until like 9:30, and I know you then have to put up with the winter where it gets dark at like 3:30, but I like that. I like the seasons. I like that there's 4 seasons, but I think more than anything, I love the culture. So, and it's changing all over the world. Like even here in Dubai now, we have some phenomenal comedians coming in, and there's like theatre and stuff, but you can't compare it to London. Like I'm going back this summer, and I've already planned like the shows I'm going to see and the exhibition at the British Museum that I want to check out and that sort of thing. And I don't think, and you also can't beat the restaurants. The food there is so good.
I agree with that one. Yeah, I definitely can agree on that one. Something interesting that you said, in fact, you can say it yourself before, because for those Brits that are listening, this will be mind-blowing to them. The UAE, Nigeria, London comparison of safety. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it goes without saying that the UAE feels the most safe. I have a 13-year-old, and one of the biggest reasons I chose the UAE was because I needed to know that he could go out and about and I didn't have to worry at all in a way that you do in London, even if you're living in like a really nice area, right? But yeah, earlier we were talking about, you know, how we get to London or get to the UK and kind of take off anything of value. And I was just saying that in Nigeria, and it's not 100% comparable because you don't walk on the streets there, you're with a car and driver. But I felt safer in Lagos, Nigeria, wearing, you know, maybe like a diamond tennis bracelet or a watch or some earrings or whatever, carrying a nice handbag, than I do in London. Like when I'm in London, it's like just a crossbody, no jewelry, you know, because you're walking on the streets and stuff, and you just don't want to take any chances with the crime at the moment. So yeah, definitely safest in the UAE, but second Nigeria.
And for somebody that I'm like, as much as I'm British, I'm quite anti-British in that I just think the country is falling badly. But even for me, I would just assume that anywhere in Africa, anywhere in Asia, apart from obviously parts of the Middle East, would just feel less safe at all points than even London. And you find it, granted there's, you know, some differences with the cars and stuff, but you find it more secure there. That's mind-blowing even for me.
Yeah, it is. And it really breaks my heart because a bit like you, like I'm very British and patriotic. And it really breaks my heart that we've got to a point where this phenomenal country is really on its knees, and there's people leaving in droves because they just don't feel safe there anymore.
Just about anyone that I know that is doing well is planning to move here. Literally planning to move to Dubai. 2 of my best mates that I said I was on a stag do with last week that are considering moving here. It's crazy the amount of people that are moving here, and you kind of think 5-10 years ahead, like what if we export all of our good people to somewhere else? Then what? Like who's going to make the next generation in the UK?
I think about that all the time, and honestly, I don't even think it's going to be 5 to 10 years. I think it's going to be
5 to 10 months.
Yeah, it's going to be much sooner than that, unfortunately. But.
Anyway, enough about that. Let's go back. So something that I wanted to speak about, and you mentioned it yourself. You said I got married ridiculously young. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I got married at 24.
Right, okay, that's not as ridiculously young as I thought it was going to be. Right, okay, fine.
And I do think that the world is changing, and you know, you're a lot younger than I am, and I think there's a gap, like sort of my generation, or maybe we're like a half generation apart. But with my generation, you know, you really grew up on the Disney classics and on you know, movies like Love Actually, which was my all-time favorite. And I think it painted a very unrealistic picture of what love is and what marriage looks like. And also, to be perfectly honest, you never actually saw what marriage looked like because all the movies end when they get married. It's like
that's true, yeah.
You know, they get together and they live happily ever after, and you're like, wait a minute, why has no one made a movie to show what happens after, like what it's like to actually be, you know, to actually be married. And I think that with, you know, people living longer now, I say to people, just you know, experience your life, like make all those crazy moves in your 20s, like make all the big decisions, live in different countries, go traveling, like hustle for a job that, you know, or start your own business, and do all of that before you decide that you want to like settle down. Now listen, I am a woman, so I know I'm saying this, and some women might be like, but what about if I want to have kids, or what about if I miss the boat, or but things are changing. The age of when people used to have their first child in the last sort of 15 years has changed by a decade, where it was pretty average. When I had my son, 28 was pretty average age, and now people are having their first children at 38. I think the world is changing, and not a lot of people are changing, as quickly as the world is changing, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And look, this goes for things like AI as well, for the education system. So I used to teach, and I look at these things and I'm like, the curriculum's not catching up with where the world is at. People are not, there's still people who don't use any artificial intelligence. I'm like, how do you go about your day not like, tapping into that?
I don't know how I would live without it now.
Yeah. And I think that's also a generational thing sometimes. Like I do, but I speak to a lot of people who are like in their late 40s and early 50s, so, 10 to 15 years older than me, and they are just not tapping into it in the same way that people in their 30s are.
Yeah, it makes sense. So South Asian culture, I've watched the programs. You get married at 13 and then there's honor killings and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Does that actually happen? Again, white, British, 30-year-old man that is so alien to.
Yeah. So I think these things do happen, but it's such a small percentage. Like, say, for example, you go to parts of India. Yeah, in smaller villages, maybe they're still doing things like that. You go to parts of Africa and, like, FGM is still a thing. But I think, on the whole, no. And I'm glad you asked that question, because I also feel, and I will defend it a little bit because I grew up there and recently spent some time there. In Nigeria, for example, people who have never been to Africa have a very one-sided view of what Nigeria is like. And I don't totally blame them, because it has got its reputation for corruption and stuff like that. But actually, the culture and the history and, the way families are set up and the community, like, you can't replicate that. Like, the community living and the way people show up for people is absolutely phenomenal. And when I lived there now, I got to know, it was quite different, obviously, as a child, but as an adult, when I lived there and got to know a lot more Nigerian women, the businesses they are building and the things they're doing, it's stuff you wouldn't even imagine, So, yeah, I think sometimes I don't watch the media. I am just totally against it. I know. I think that they paint a picture of certain places that is so misguided, to be honest. And
here's the prime example. Dubai is a prime example. If you go and drink, you will go to jail for 40 years and get 40 lashes type stuff. Like, no, that's just not the case.
Yeah, that's true. But that's changing. I feel like finally Dubai has put the Middle East on the map.
100%.
Yeah.
Definitely.
People now are like, oh, wow, okay, so you're able to do that, and you're able to go out, and you don't have to cover your hair, and you can wear shorts. Like, oh.
Yeah, it's just so different to what is kind of shown in the media.
Yeah.
So Africa, interesting point on that. I just read Russ Cook's book. Have you seen The Hardest Geezer? Russ Cook, the guy that ran the length of Africa.
Yes.
Started in South Africa, ran the whole way up. In the last maybe 2-3 months, I read that book. And what you said was the main thing that he saw was the community. It was like, there's a lot of things in Britain that are better, or in the Western world that are better than Africa, but their community and the way that they all come together and the family stuff is like that opened a completely new light to me. Like, his family, he fought with them his whole like youth. I think he left his house when he was like 16, bit of like a rogue. He doesn't go into too much detail, but definitely I think had some big fallings out with his family. And he was like, on that trip through Africa, that was the thing that I realized was like, I've been such a bad son and I need to go and fix it. And I found that really interesting, that the community there is so much kind of more prevalent.
Yeah, we talk about loneliness, and I often speak to people who are very lonely in relationships. Like, they're in relationships and they're still lonely. That doesn't exist in the same way in Africa. In the UK now, they've got all these reports coming out of like lost boys, and they're worried, and I totally understand it. Like, I am worried for the next generation of boys, but you don't have that, because I don't think there's any opportunity to be lonely, when you're living in community like that in Africa.
So there's another interesting thing, lost boys. So have you seen Adolescence?
Yes, I have seen Adolescence.
What's your take?
It was pretty hard to watch. I think it's such a difficult situation to be in, because what really blew my mind about the very beginning of that show is that when they showed him, he was sitting in his room and he still had like the space wallpaper, and he came across as so young.
Yeah.
You know, even though he was 13, he came across as so young. And then when you see it unfold and the way he showed up with the psychologist in episode 3, you're just like, when did he get so angry? Yeah. And I do think that sometimes you don't even realize, right? He was under his parents' roof. They were like, okay, you can sort of, you're in your room and so you're safe. But I often say to people, would you take your child and like put them in the middle of Hyde Park, for example, if you're in the UK, at 11 p.m. at night, all on their own, like your 8-year-old? And I'm pretty certain that almost every parent would say no. Yeah. And yet that's what you're doing with phones and with the,
that's
and
a
with
good
the
point.
internet.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't, like that is the entire world in their palm. And I mean, this is a whole other conversation about the way that social media companies, set things up to kind of lure children in, and there's no accountability or whatever. There's a guy called Jonathan Haidt who's a NYU Stern professor, and he's written a book called The Anxious Generation. And I know that some of the data sometimes can be skewed, but for the most part there is a problem when it comes to social media. And it's social media, like even adolescence aside, social media is eroding relationships. Like I always say to people, when you're in a relationship with someone, there's like 4 of you. It's like you, your partner, and then your 2 phones, because it's such a distraction.
It's so interesting, yeah.
And the other thing I will just add about social media, which really gets under my skin, is people are becoming so over-dependent on it. So I have a friend, for example, and she was in a situationship, let's just call it that, and she was using social media almost as a therapy tool, so she was showing me all these reels, and it was like, oh, look at this, and this person says like he did this, and so I should not be talking to him, and I should be doing this, and I should know my worth. And I'm like, there's so much more nuance to relationships than that.
Than a 5-second meme on Instagram.
Or like a reel. Yeah, totally. So I think we need to be mindful of the way we use social media in our relationships, especially.
Yeah, on the adolescence thing, I thought was like incredibly produced first. Like, how cool was it that they did the whole one shot thing? I thought that was so cool. And obviously, what is happening is terrible. There is no doubt about that. But I think as a society, we're creating young boys like that. I think that pushing them down so much, suppressing their feelings, and you'll probably understand this way more than I do. I think that young boys are getting so suppressed and so like told they're bad that some of them are acting out, and I don't even know where you begin to fix that.
No, and the problem is it's so it's such a vicious circle, right? Because people think that, oh, if I kind of do this and I do that and I protect them from it. There's no protecting them from it. If you don't give your child a device, they're at school and their friend is showing it to them on their device. But yeah, when you suppress them, that's when they're going to end up going out and listening to, certain men out there who are speaking certain things. Because even if you look at particularly well-known people on... I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to mention any names, but on social media who people don't like.
Go for it. Mention it.
Like the Andrew Tates of the world, which, I don't know, for some people the jury's out on that. But when he first started, a lot of the stuff he said made sense. A lot of the stuff that he was saying made total sense. I listened to it and I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see why boys would follow that if they're already feeling a bit like, oh, I'm not getting as much attention, or girls are getting certain opportunities that I'm not. And yes, some of that might have changed and become a little dangerous in some of the stuff that he was saying, but it didn't start out like that. And I think that's the biggest sort of piece when it comes to ensuring that being a feminist, for example, doesn't mean putting boys down at the expense of girls. It means
that's where it goes wrong, I think.
Yeah, that's where it goes wrong. It's lifting girls up so that they have that, kind of equality or equity. And so I think, when it comes to boys and girls, that's a really important piece.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Funnily enough, on Andrew Tate, so I had one of his friends on last week, and we were speaking about, and I agree with what you're saying there. I think a lot of what he says makes sense. I think there's 20% that he does so that you and I talk about him just now.
Exactly.
I think that he says the abrasive stuff, the offensive stuff, so that people go, oh my God, what a bad guy. And like, what sells more than controversy? How many people share him saying what a bad guy? I think he probably believes a lot of what he says. I think he makes it 20% more aggressive. And I don't agree with his most aggressive 20%. I think that some of it's crazy. But I think there's a lot of value in it that we probably shouldn't be ostracizing in the way that we are. Because again, I think that fuels it. I think this whole thing fuels it, that kids that are like young boys listen to him and go, well, I agree with a lot of what he says. I feel a lot of what he says. And then we get told, shut up, that's bad. You can't listen to that.
Yeah.
I don't know who the next set of male role models are going to be, because I just think kids are getting so suppressed.
Yeah. And again, to your point, like if I say to you, don't think of a pink elephant, you're going to think of a pink elephant. And it's the same thing. You say to children, don't listen to him, he's bad. But you're not willing to have the conversation with your child about it. I mean, that's a relationship flaw as well, right? Like, you have to be able to have conversations. You have to educate yourself enough to have a conversation with your child so that you're not so scared of, saying something to them that, you're not sure about yourself.
Makes sense. Okay, a bit more about you. What's your proudest moment?
Oh, gosh, I haven't thought about that in a while. What is my proudest moment? I think if I look back on last year was a particularly tough year. My son was going through a lot at school. He was being bullied. The school couldn't get a handle on it. And I decided to pull him out. So he finished the academic year and at the end of June, and we were living in Nigeria at the time. And I pulled him out and I thought to myself, I'm going to take him out for a term and I'm going to take him world schooling. So I'm going to take him to like the Amazon rainforest and the Galapagos and Peru, and we're just going to go traveling, and he'll learn via like the Khan Academy or something, and he'll do his math and English, but everything else he'll learn just by traveling. Can you believe he said no?
No way. Why?
Yeah, he said no. And I don't blame him, because school is all he knows. And so he's like, what if people think I'm really weird because I'm not at school? I'm like, you're going to get to 19 and kick yourself and be like, I wish I took that opportunity when I was 12 for my, to go traveling. So instead we homeschooled for a term. And the reason I say that being my proudest moment is because I speak to a lot of parents whose children are struggling, and they just think, no, but they have to be at school, but they have to be doing this, they should be doing that, and what are people going to think, and what if I do this? And I'm like, but
this is the exact same as the relationship thing, the marriage. Yes. Should I leave, should I not? It's the exact same thing.
Yeah, and exactly. And I think you're right, it links to marriage, but it also links to what you do for your kids. It's like, what's the most important thing here? Your child. Okay, your child's not happy. And I think also, being a coach myself, I could see where his confidence was at, where his self-worth was at. And because I've seen adults who had things happen to them at the age of 12 and 13 and don't ever fully recover from it, maybe I had an advantage. I was like, I need to fix this. And so we didn't go world schooling, but we did homeschool for a term. I will just say that I don't have the patience. He had a phenomenal tutor who came in, who really boosted his self-esteem, and nothing happened in the sense that he didn't lose a year at school. We then moved here and he slotted right back into his grade. His confidence was boosted. His self-esteem came back up. He went from doing really badly at school, because when your nervous system is not regulated and your mind is all over the place, you physically can't learn, to like acing his last set of tests. And so I look back at that now and think, I'm really proud of myself for being like, this is not working for him. Let's fix it. And yes, to your point about this being like relationships, if you're like, this is not working for me, don't just leave. Say, let's fix this. Don't just like drag a dead horse almost for months on end. So I think I'm pretty proud of myself for that. Yeah.
Talk to me about some challenges you've faced. So you've mentioned one there that you've turned around to be a positive. What other challenges have you faced in your time?
Oh gosh, so many. I think, so my ex-partner sort of chose not to be in our lives. And I think becoming a solo parent, so not just a single parent, but a solo parent when I didn't expect it, has probably been one of my biggest challenges. And I'm really lucky, actually, that I have a really, really supportive family, and I truly believe in the, like, it takes a village to raise a child. And so learning how to ask for help, and allowing people to, come in and support us, whether it's emotionally or physically or whatever. But that probably has been one of the biggest challenges. And I say that also because I think that that's one of the things that a lot of people who aren't in very happy marriages struggle with, because they just think, I don't want to have to be a single parent. Like, okay, this person's doing all this stuff, but at least they're there. At least they're, sort of in
paying
some
the bills
way,
or whatever.
Yeah, paying the bills or helping out in some way, or taking the kids out. And so I won't lie, it is a challenge. It is tough, but I still don't think it's as hard as being in a relationship where you're not happy.
That's an interesting point, and I guess that it helps you with your job now, that you can, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm talking from the textbook. I've got always had great relationships. You can go, well, I've actually experienced this, and this is what I think.
Yeah, and I think that and like sort of the cultural nuance, having lived in so many different places, are really what helps with what I do, or makes me good at what I do.
Makes sense. Right, I'm going to read out some stuff from your Instagram.
Okay.
On my very broken phone. My phone's broken. I've got a new one coming this morning, so it won't be broken for long. I did also print out some notes in case I needed them.
Organised.
I'm terribly not organised, but I thought, let's get them ready for today. So yeah, just a couple of quotes from one of your posts that I'd like to understand a little bit more, and I'm sure people at home will as well. So you said what you can help with, what you promised to do, to help you break free from outdated relationship patterns. What's an outdated relationship pattern, and how do we fix it?
Yeah. So an outdated relationship pattern is where you are responding to something that's happening in exactly the same way every single time. And it's so subconscious that you don't even realize it. So your partner says something, you get triggered, you respond in the same way. And I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I know
massively.
A lot of
we had that issue. We've actually done really well. We communicated, and what was the other word you used?
Comprehension.
Comprehended, and we have solved it massively, and well done to my girlfriend for that.
Yeah.
But we really had that issue for the first kind of year or two.
Yeah, because you speak to people who've been married for years and they're having the same argument every single month. And I'm like, if you're having the same argument, like the same outcome, surely we need to like change.
Let's go to the root of it, and let's fix it there. Yeah.
And I think that's also just, something society does now. It's very like, let's just stick a Band-Aid on it. And I'm like, no, let's go to the root of it. Why are you responding in that way? I'll give you an example. I had a Ghanaian client once, and she was married to, in her words, an English like middle class man, and they had a lot of, they were always like arguing, because she came from she was really feisty. She came from a family of very strong women. He was raised by a single mother. He was just a lot quieter. And they'd finally decided that they would take turns with regards to like chores at home and washing dishes and stuff like that. And when it was his day, he would put a mug into the sink and he would leave it there, and he'd rather wash up at the end of the day. And she could not handle that. And I said to her, do you have a deep sink or a shallow sink? And she was like, a deep sink. I said, so do you see the mug? And she was like, no. I was like, right. So what's the problem with the mug being there if he chooses to do it at the end of the day rather than do it as he goes? And what we unpacked over like a couple of sessions was that for her, having a completely tidy house in her culture meant that it made her like a good wife and a good woman. And so much of her sense of worth was tied to being a good wife. Without stopping to think that like where her mum wasn't working and could wash the dishes like all day, she was working, plus she was in the process of like starting her own side business. And but it's so subconscious. If you asked her, she'd just be like, because it's just there and like it should be washed. Actually, but why? And looking, going back down, like you said, to the root and asking, but why? It was because she was tying her self-worth to a clean house.
Yeah.
It's so simple when you actually do the work and realize that a lot of the times it's not what it appears to be when you're talking. It's something, beneath the surface. And you just have to uncover what that is.
100%. That makes so much sense. It reminds me of, I don't know if it's a fable or a story. I'm probably going to get this wrong. But there was a story, I think in one of my books, where somebody was cooking something. It was like a piece of lamb or something. And she put it in the oven, but before she puts it in the oven, she cuts the end off. and it goes in the oven. Do you know where this is going?
I do, but please
Yeah,
go ahead so the listeners
I'm going to keep
can
going.
listen.
She cuts the end off. If you've heard this before, I'm definitely getting it wrong, but we'll go with it. I'll get the point of it. So she cuts the end off. And then somebody asks her, like, why did you cut the end off of that? And she goes, I don't know, my mum did it. And so they went and asked the mum, and the exact same thing. The mum went, well, I don't know either. My mum did it. And then they ended up asking her, and she burst out laughing. And they were like, why are you laughing? She went, because my oven was too small to fit in the lamb that I had to cut the end off of it. And so nobody at any point has gone, why have we cut that off? And that's like exactly what you're talking about there, that nobody's gone, well, why does it need to clean just now?
Yeah.
And then you could actually get to, well, there's no actual genuine reason for it.
Yeah, and you got that story down perfectly.
Good.
But yeah, it's true. We basically question everything. I'm like, question why you do certain things. Like, it's not just, oh, it's the way it's always been done. Oh, because I should do it. Oh, that's just the way, No, question, why am I doing this? Like, uncover things, unravel, why you're showing up the way that you are.
Yeah. Okay, next one. To guide you in building your self-worth and confidence. Okay, that's a bit more of an obvious one, but why is that important?
Yeah, because so much of how we show up comes from where our confidence is sitting, or where our sense of self-worth is sitting. And look, let's take dating as an example, because I know a lot of people sort of struggle with this, and they'll go out and they're dating, and if, for example, someone is not interested in you, if you have a strong sense of self-worth, you're going to be like, okay, he's not interested in me, full stop. It ends there. If you don't have a strong sense of self-worth, it's going to be like, why doesn't he like me? Is it my hair? Is it my body? Or maybe, maybe it's this. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe I wasn't dressed well enough. Maybe he didn't like. And suddenly you are spiraling. And so you don't spiral when you have a strong sense of self-worth. You just see it for what it is. You're like, maybe he's just not interested in me, and that's okay, right? Because there's lots of people that you might not be interested in, and so I think that's why that is really important, because it informs so much of what we end up doing, not just in relationships and dating, but also at work, or with our friends in social spaces. Our sense of self-worth informs, so much of what we're doing.
Can you go too far the other way with that?
Being a little bit like too cocky or too arrogant. Yeah, definitely. I think so. Where you just think no one can, like, I am so good, it can't ever be me. I think so. And I think that's where people lose personal responsibility. So even when I speak to people in relationships, I always tell them it's really important. Personal responsibility is really important. If someone comes in and starts talking to me and says, and say, it could be anyone, I keep saying her, let's say it's a man, and it's like, she does this and she does that and she's like this, and I'm like, okay, maybe she is doing all of these things, but let's look at like where your personal responsibility comes in. And there's
probably a reflection of every single one of those things that she's saying that he does that is the reason for it happening.
Yeah, exactly. And also they say that what annoys, there's a part of what annoys us in someone else that sits within us as well. And like that the other person is a mirror.
Yeah.
And so when we're getting really annoyed about something, sometimes we need to reflect inwards and be like, why is this grating me as much as it is?
Yeah. So. I was sort of asking that for myself. Not that I feel like I'm overconfident, but definitely when you were saying, you just go, oh, well, and get on with your life. Like, I definitely do that a lot. Small example that I told you about earlier, the guest that I was meant to be recording with later on today, we were messaging on Instagram. I was going to be recording with somebody else later on today. And then I texted him. He sent me his number and I texted him. I went, oh, see you in a couple of days. Here's the address, blah, blah, blah. And he never replied. And I just went, oh, well, mustn't want to come. And I just got on with my life. Yeah. And then he messaged me on Instagram last night and he's like, oh, what's happening? You've not sent me the address. Turned out he'd sent the wrong number. If I'd maybe been a little bit more like, oh, well, what's going on here? I would have maybe went and messaged him. But yeah, I maybe went a little bit too far the other day. It was the other way that I was like, oh, well, maybe he doesn't want to come on. I'm just going to get on with my life rather than messaging him. So I don't think I'm as bad as maybe that overconfidence and arrogance that you were saying there. But yeah, maybe it does sometimes get in my way a little bit.
Yeah, but I don't even think that's overconfidence as such. I think that's more like, oh, I'm just going to go with the flow. Like,
whatever.
I'm not going to, push anything or force anything and whatever. That's also a good way to be, I think.
Good. Okay, good. Right. I'm not broken
You're
yet.
fine.
I'm not broken yet. Give you real actionable tools to thrive, not just survive. So let's talk about that thrive, not just survive bit. What's the difference between thriving and surviving? Give me 2 examples.
Yeah. I think thriving is being more conscious. So just being more conscious about the way that you show up, because most of us are in survival mode. Most people are just operating. So when you're operating from your subconscious, a lot of the times you're in survival mode. You're responding from a place that you don't even understand or you don't even know, like I was saying earlier. But when you can get more conscious about why things are happening, you do start to thrive, because you're just doing things with a bit more like meaning behind them. Like, you understand why it is that you're doing something. And yes, it takes a little bit of work. It might take sessions with somebody. It might, take reading a few books and stuff like that, or being self-reflective. But it's so much more of a better place to live when you can be in that kind of conscious space and realize, like, why it is that you're making certain decisions, or why that you're making, why it is that you're making certain choices. And this all stems from something. So have you ever heard of something called the reticular activating system?
Yeah, but I don't know what it is. I've heard the words.
Yeah. So the reticular activating system is essentially at the base of our necks, at the back of our heads, and it essentially acts as a bouncer for everything. If we had to take in everything that was happening at all times, like that little emoji where you're like, that. And so our brains have to act as a bouncer to send into our conscious the things that are important to us. So, for example, if you went out and you test drove, I don't know, a Nissan Patrol, for example, that seems to be the car of Dubai.
That's a Dubai thing,
It's a Dubai thing. So if you went out and drove one of those and you were interested in one of those, you might suddenly find that you're seeing lots of Nissan Patrols. Or maybe that was a bad example because you see them anyway, but you know what I mean. And you start seeing a lot of them. And that's because your reticular activating system has been told that that's now important to you, so it's going to start to show you many more of those. Were they always there? Yes. Did you always notice them? No.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing with anything. If you want to think about what's important to you, as opposed to just surviving and doing the same thing over and over again, you have to think about what it is that you're feeding your reticular activating system. What are you telling it is important? Because that's what it's going to show you more of, and that's how you're going to end up being as such in life. And so I think when it comes to the thriving, it's about rewiring that, and changing what it is that you're telling your reticular activating system is important.
Makes sense. Okay, last one.
All right.
To create space where you feel seen, heard, and empowered. That sounds maybe a bit boring. Is that important to me?
Yeah. I think it is important to you, because although saying that, AI might be changing this, because have you heard that lots of people are now going onto ChatGPT and using it as like their best friend or their therapy?
I've been doing that a little bit.
But you do know it's set up to like just totally glaze you, be, like your biggest cheerleader.
Yeah. Well, I've been telling it not to be. I've been saying be a bit nasty.
No, but that's a good thing, because otherwise you're just gonna, maybe then that's where, not for you, but for other people, overconfidence comes in, because it's like, I can do no wrong. Like ChatGPT said that I'm like the best person ever. But I think that a lot of people, and this is where the comprehension comes in. A lot of people, when they're communicating with their partners and they just feel like their partner's not understanding, the comprehension is not there, they don't feel seen, and they don't feel heard. And sometimes with when you engage with a coach or you engage with a therapist, it's someone who's holding space for you, just to be able to speak about things that you might not feel comfortable speaking to friends about. I mean, I've actually coached some friends, and I always tell them there's one big difference between me as a friend and me as a coach. I was like, as a coach, I will ask you things that as a friend I would never ask you. Either way, it's confidential. That's just like who I am. But I would ask you questions as a coach that as a friend I just wouldn't, because you're like, I don't know how they're going to take this. I don't know if I'm overstepping, even with one of your closest friends. Yeah. And so I think, although maybe I should change that if it doesn't kind of tell what it's actually doing. Yeah. But just holding space for people.
So I said, it sounds a little bit boring as maybe me of 5 years ago. What I've come to realize through learning and, speaking to people like you is actually feeling seen and heard is kind of the root of just about everything. If a girl's putting up half-naked pictures on Instagram, it's because she doesn't feel seen, and that's her way of starting to try and feel seen. I'm not going to try and think of another example off the top of my head. I couldn't have another one there, but would you agree with that? Is that the root of a lot of stuff?
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that and I'm also glad you said we can mention people, because there's something that's really been irking me for a while now. I don't know if you have come across someone called Bonnie Blue.
Yes.
Yeah. That sort of stuff really worries me,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't buy the whole...
I probably shouldn't have admitted that. No idea who you're talking about.
To be perfectly honest, the reason that I came across her, otherwise, I wouldn't, is because she was on the This Morning show, and I happened to follow them on Instagram, and that's how I saw it. And I was like, oh, really? I was surprised that something like the This Morning show had her on there, but she was on there, and that's how I found out about her. And now I don't follow her or anything, but every so often on social media things will flash up. And I think one of sort of her arguments, and the other person that she works with, is that we're empowering women and that it's okay. I don't think so. I don't think that's empowering women. I truly believe that there's something much more deep rooted there if you think that that's all right. I say this trying not to sound judgy.
Yeah.
But to me, that's really worrying. Yeah. And I would think that if you feel like you need to allow people to use you in that manner, maybe you're just trying to feel seen and heard, because that's not empowering women, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you mentioned the This Morning thing, because this kind of comes back to previous conversations of the world's changing so much that, are we going a little bit too far? And that might be one of the examples that we are.
Yeah.
We're portraying this girl that does like pretty crazy porn, and going, oh yeah, this is like a person that we're going to chat to on the TV, and it's going to be like normal.
Yeah. And also, I think one of the comments she made was around like how we need to be okay with people who are like sex workers or whatever, except that's not what you are. Like trying to hit a record of having 1,057 people, in one night is not what a sex worker does. There's a huge difference. I think you're almost like insulting the profession.
The grassroots sex workers.
Exactly, yeah.
Never thought I would say that term on the podcast, the grassroots sex workers. And I think that there's probably a lot of parallels between her and Andrew Tate as well. I think that a lot of the stuff that both of they do is for the airtime, for the shock factor, for the, oh my God, I can't believe they did that. Like, I think the first kind of thing that she did that she broke out with is she went and found the youngest guys that she could. They called it like schoolies. And it was like kids that had just turned 18.
Legal.
Yeah, legal.
Yeah.
The youngest that they could get that were like just coming out of school or still in school but 18. And that caused uproar. This is only like a year ago, 18 months ago maybe. And she's gone from that to like, I would say actual celebrity now, like genuinely famous celebrity. And it's that shock factor that, does she agree with what she's doing? I think that probably if she was sitting having a chat with you, she'd probably say a lot of it's for show, because I understand. I think she really, really, and so does Andrew Tate, understand human psychology and marketing. I think they're geniuses. But yeah, I do think a bit of it's performative. That doesn't change the impact it has on the people that see it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like it's such short-term thinking. It's such short-term thinking. Sure, like you're now a multi-millionaire or whatever, but I think sometimes you're dehumanizing yourself a little bit, because we have emotions, and it comes back to what we were talking about earlier with the whole with the biology. Like you have emotions, you are a person, and I don't believe that anyone can switch themselves off, really to do what they're doing and then just think, oh no, well, it's fine.
Have you seen Lily Phillips? Very similar to Bonnie Blue.
Is she the one she works with?
Yeah, I think they've done like one or two things together, and then they both got pregnant at the same time, and it was again just total performative. I didn't even know that. So there was a whole, again, same thing, this whole marketing thing. They were both pregnant, and then they weren't, and it was both at the same time, and they're arguing, but then again, it's all a show. They're probably friends. They probably text each other. But then,
Yeah.
you know, oh, they're arguing. More people talk about it. Anyway, she done like a vlog thing, and there was total uproar about this because she was crying before she was going down to like do one of these scenes. She was crying after. I don't know. I've not actually seen like the crying thing, but I've seen like the reactions to it online.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess that shows that there is a, well, I mean, arguably, there's either a human side and she's actually being genuine, or, you know, is it kind of like 4D chess thinking that she's deliberately crying so that me and you're talking about it right now.
Yeah.
You know, there's maybe that element, but yeah, she was crying like before and after these scenes. And yeah, very similar to kind of what Bonnie Blue does.
Yeah, it blows my mind that we are so, you know, that controversy and, you know, negative news gets far more attention than, you know, than the positive.
Yeah, 100%. Right, before we flip the script onto me, couple more things. So, what have you wanted that you've never got?
A trapper keeper. When I was younger, my cousin was at the American school, and they used to get these really cool trapper keeper from the States, and I always wanted one. But seriously, what do I want that I've never got? I don't think there's anything that I've really wanted that I never got, or been disappointed or held on to or anything like that. Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything.
Good. Okay. Any more challenges? Any more successes that you want to talk about?
I don't know. When it comes to challenges, I mean, we all have so many challenges, don't we, on a day to day? I think one of, I'll talk about a success or something that I think, you know, some of your listeners might be able to relate to. And that is building connection. So because I've moved around so many times, you really learn how to build connection really quickly, because you have to survive, right? And I think being able to, so many people say to me, like, I don't know how you just like up and decide like you're just gonna move to another country, and a bit like you did, to be honest. And I just think to myself that when you learn how to build human connection, the world is your oyster. Like, you can do anything it is that you want, and you can make those moves. And that also comes back to the whole like survive versus thrive thing. I would say to anyone, like, just ask yourself. So you know how people say, what's the worst that can happen, right? My go-to...
I say that too much.
No, so I'll give you another one instead. You're only changing one word, but and a friend of mine always jokes that I should trademark this, but I ask myself, and I ask clients, and I ask people, what's the best that can happen? Because when you ask yourself what's the best that can happen, everything changes. So rather than being like, oh, well, it's okay, if the worst happens, this will happen, and then I'll just move back or whatever. When you ask yourself what's the best that can happen, not only do you kind of change your thinking completely to be like, oh, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, it's exciting, but you're also you know, telling your little bouncer, your RAS, like, hey, these are all the possibilities. And this is where, like, I guess manifestation and stuff comes in, although I use that term lightly. But suddenly you're opening yourself up to the different opportunities that can come your way, rather than all the things that could go.
Yeah. Okay, you're an expert in life and relationships. Fix me, I'm broken.
Okay, well, you're not broken. No one's broken.
You've not seen me in at night time.
Okay, so what do you think one of your biggest challenges are day to day?
I think that probably right now I'm bored. I'm bored because I've always... God, this is going to get quite deep quite quick. I've always thrived off of problems and fixing problems. And so I would create problems to fix them and then feel like a great guy for fixing them. I'd be like, oh, that big, massive problem, well, we ran out of money in the business and I fixed it. I managed to magic up this money and we fixed it. Or, oh, this really bad thing happened, but I fixed it. I'm, you know, the hero for fixing it. And so my whole life has been created around fixing these problems and, you know, getting a hit from it and then moving on to the next one. And I've realised that that's probably not a very good way to live. So I've stopped creating the problems, and don't get me wrong, they still come up and I still fix them. But I'm now at a point where I've ran out of problems, but I don't know what my next motivation is. So my motivation my whole life has been running away from that problem, and I'm going to fix it, and I always have. And now I'm at a point where I'm bored and I'm lost because I'm like, I don't have any problems to fix, but I don't know what's going to get me out of bed tomorrow. That's going to excite me. Don't get me wrong, I still go to my gym, I still do get out of bed. But when I get to my desk, I'm like, I'm a bit bored.
So it's almost like lost a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
What does it give you to be the person that fixes things?
I feel important, probably. I feel like, often the problems that I fix, I feel like nobody else could. And that, I guess, makes me feel good. That I'm like, oh yeah, great, I fixed that problem. Nobody else could have done that. I'm such a, big, strong person for doing that.
So it gives you a sense of validation.
Yeah, I guess so.
Where have you felt that previously, that you needed that sense of validation? Because it would sound like maybe you're trying to, as opposed to validating yourself, getting someone else's validation.
So, God, we're going to get even deeper. At school, I was a loser, right? Like, when I was 14, 15, I was a total loser. And I, figured out a bit of a system to become not a loser anymore. I think I did well at it. And I guess that it's potentially something there that, I was never seen or heard when I was, 14. I just played computer games and stuff. And don't get me wrong, that has its benefits. It's now motivated me to do these things. But I would say that it probably comes from there, that I was a loser back then and nobody really seen me.
And what was your system?
I just figured out how to get girls. I figured out there was a system to it. I figured out how to make money. There's a system to it. And so I'm a really good pattern matcher. So I just looked at all these things. So it's right, well, what is success? It's you get girls when you're younger. You get the girls, or you get the money, or all of these things. And so I just kind of figured out the ways to do those things. And I've got a life coach, and we talk about the hammer. I have a hammer, and I've fixed everything in my life with the hammer. But there's 5 or 6 other tools that maybe other people have got that I don't. Yeah. And so I've always just used my hammer to fix everything I've ever done. So yeah, back when I was 17, 16, I used the hammer, and I've just used it to date. And so that's kind of my system.
And why did you think you were a loser?
There's a question I've never been asked. The popular kids were cooler than me, and I wouldn't say I ever got bullied massively. I did to an extent, but not problematically. I actually, you might completely disagree with this, but I think there's a good level of bullying to receive, which I know sounds crazy, but I think that it taught me that life's a little bit hard. As I say, it wasn't like I was going home and crying every night, but I wasn't cool enough to, not get the odd thing happen. And so yeah, I guess that, I don't know if that answered the question. I got a bit lost there, but
yeah, no, it does. And I think that's what it comes down to. So often we put labels on ourselves, right? We put labels on ourselves, like I was the loser, but against whose sort of barometer for what cool means?
Yeah, well, I guess general societal or school society, you know what school society is like. School society's barometer of what's cool.
Yeah.
I was 75%. I wasn't as uncool as the uncool people.
Yeah,
I was the top of the uncool people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that on the school's barometer, as a 15-year-old, 14-year-old of what's cool and what's not, on that barometer.
Yeah, and that just comes down to conditioning, right? We've all been so conditioned to think that this is where I should be at and I'm not. Therefore, I put a label on myself, loser. For the rest of my life, I don't ever want to be a loser again. So I'm going to make sure that I do all the things so that I'm never seen as the loser. And it's that full circle of that's why I'm doing it. That's why. So what would you say to 15-year-old Callum today? If you could go back and give him some advice and hold him by the shoulders, what would you say to him?
Weirdly, I wouldn't change much, other than the bit that I now don't understand. So, everything that I've done to date, I think has generally been right. I mean, even the bad things that I've done, I accept them all, and I think they make me who I am. So, I wouldn't want to go and change anything. But I do think I did mostly the right things at mostly the right points. And I think the bit of advice that I would give him that's missing, and this is the hard bit, is I don't know what it is. I know there's something else. I know there is. I just don't know what it is. So I would definitely say, like, it's a prime example. I've mentioned this a couple of times on the podcast. Stephen Bartlett always says, oh yeah, man, work-life balance, man. Let's, you don't need to work too hard. You don't need to blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, yes, I agree. But when he was homeless, picking up pennies from the bottom of a kebab shop floor, is that the best advice to give him? Absolutely not, because he would have never got to where he's got to. He worked 16-hour days, plus he's, worked full weekends. He's done all these crazy things. And it's like, yeah, I mean, you can do that now, but that's not tangible advice to somebody that's stuck in a 9 to 5 on £13 an hour that has minus £100 left every month after they paid just their necessities. And so how does that relate to me? I think that what I did from 15 to now was right, generally. But that missing piece of advice that I'd give to 15-year-old Callum, I don't know what it is. I know it's there somewhere. I know it exists. I just don't know what it is.
Yeah. And speaking of Stephen Bartlett, I think something he says is around how, like, using that person or, like, that passive you to push you to do better as opposed to it pulling you. And that's such a subtle difference, but it's so true, right? Some people will use, like, who they thought they were in their past to pull them, as opposed to using it to push them to get towards what they want to do, which is what he says that he does. Yeah, so and that's where I am. I can't remember which one's the negative one, push or pull, but I've definitely always used the negative one. It's always been, the kind of more toxic one. I need to run away from that thing. I need to get away. It's not, I want to run towards that thing. And in fact, when things are going well in all of my businesses and in my life, which, to be honest, is right now, like, and this is why I'm probably struggling right now, everything's fine. And it's never all been fine before, and I'm so lost because of that. And yeah, I need something to, whether it's push or pull, I need that new thing to bring me forward. Yeah. How do I find it? Where is it? Well, what are the things that light you up? What excites you? Apart from fixing problems.
Yeah, well, and this is a problem, right? There's all the cliche answers, isn't there? There's helping people, there's kids, there's all these kind of standard cliche answers, and I guess that I've always kind of wanted to buck the trend of, like, oh, that's not for me, I'll go and find my own way. So I don't know, maybe the answer, I'm probably actually sure that the answer's already there. I just am probably try and resist it a little bit.
Yeah, but what do you think? What do you think it might be? Like, what do you think you're resisting?
I think that probably one of the main things is that my hammer served me so well that I'm scared to abandon it. And, like, it's done great things for me. It's moved me to Dubai. I've got all these successful businesses. I've got the podcast. I've got all these things going on, and I'm probably a bit scared of, like, turning my back on the hammer and going and finding something else that I don't even want to think about. There's definitely, like, some sort of crazy mental block, because I figure things out so quickly. I'm a smart guy. I figure things out, and I just can't figure this one out. I mean, look, even there, you're asking me direct questions. I'm not giving you an answer. I'm giving you noise.
I can see that. Okay, so you're not going to get away that easily, because I totally clocked onto the fact that you didn't actually answer my question. But you're putting a label on yourself again. So where before you thought I was the loser, and now you think I'm the hammer, what would you do if you didn't label yourself?
Be lost as hell. Like, and that, I guess that's probably what I need to figure out. But yeah, I would definitely, I don't know what I would do without either of those things.
I think you do.
So this is what my life coach keeps telling me as well, and I just can't figure it out.
I think you do. If you weren't worried about what anyone thought, and it didn't matter, like, no one's opinion mattered, even to a certain extent your own, what would you do?
Play golf a lot. I play a bit more golf. I do more podcasts, and I'd, I don't know, potentially work a bit less, but I'm working a lot less now. I would still definitely do like all my morning routine and stuff. But yeah, I'd play a bit more golf. And I definitely think there's probably a bit of like a friends thing missing where I don't do enough with friends and family and stuff. That's definitely something that, I'm trying to consider just now. But again, I'm not sure that I want to. Like, I had this whole thing with my life coach for ages where he's like, oh, you need to go and find more friends in Dubai. I've got enough. I'm not interested in more friends.
Yeah.
And thankfully, a couple of them are moving here now, which is great. But yeah, that's definitely probably what I would do.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't necessarily think you need to meet more friends if you're good with the people, but it's more finding that thing. So why wouldn't you play more golf?
I've started, to be fair. I played last week. I'm wanting to play again this week, and I am bringing it in a little bit more. But why do I not? I am probably quite structured and quite in routine, and I've potentially got slightly different motivations just now. I've put a big focus on investing in finance and stuff like that. Much like what you said, I used to, whenever I got money, be like, I'll go and spend it. And over the last kind of 18 months, I've really transitioned into let's invest a little bit more, let's save a little bit more. It's expensive, right? It's like 1,000 dirhams around, like £200 around, so it is quite expensive. But I don't know, again, maybe that's just a story I'm telling myself. But yeah, I just kind of get stuck at my desk. And that's it. I think there's probably a little bit of kind of workaholic in there. I'm trying to transition away of being like, right, okay, this is what I need to do, and when it's done and I can get on. But I definitely, like, if I give myself a task list and when, right, that's a day's work and I finish it by 2 p.m, at 2 p.m. I'd be like, well, what am I going to do now? Let's do tomorrow's work, because then I can get ahead of tomorrow rather than going, well, what can I do now? I can do, something else. So there's probably a bit of kind of workaholic in there. Not crazy. Again, it's probably the hammer coming in of like workaholic / hammer of like, well, let's just do something else then.
Yeah. When you think of starting a new business, how does that feel?
I like it. Yeah, I always like it, and I'm just trying to stop myself because I've done a few, and even like the podcast, like granted it's not a business, it doesn't make money, but like it's still a thing that like I'm probably always filling the void.
But it's not necessarily a bad thing. So we talked about Stephen Bartlett earlier, and now he talks about like all the companies that he invests in, which are, like 40 or 50 companies and the different things he does. What I mean to say is that sometimes the self-reflection and the work might tell us that we should be doing something else because we shouldn't be doing, what we've been told we should always do. But if that's what gives you purpose and wakes you up in the morning, then that's not necessarily a bad thing. Right?
Okay.
As long as you're more conscious of it. So you're not doing it because, whereas you said before, I'd create a problem and then fix it and create a problem, fix it. And now you're conscious that that's what you're doing. You're like, how can I use my strength, of the hammer to now do things that I would feel more excited about? Because it's not so much should I be doing things that are more more casual and stuff like that versus should I not be working. Like the term workaholic, if you're loving what you do, I find it like a
game.
Like
it's like fun. It's like a game. Everything that I do, even the bad bits, it's like a game.
And so that could be investing in businesses, it could be helping startups. I mean, there's so many ways that you could still feel fulfilled whilst not necessarily adding that much more onto your plate for you, if that makes sense, like for your business.
Yeah.
But
I've dabbled in that as well. Like I've got a couple of people that I help that, started their businesses after me that came to me for advice, and I really enjoy it. And, I have always thought, should I find someone just like me of 10 years ago and go and give them some money to go and do something like that I like the sound of that, and that maybe that's what I need to do.
Maybe.
Fixed. Right.
It comes down to that whole like, what's the best that can happen as well. Like make a list of all the things that like excite you without the cliches. And I wouldn't go with the whole like, oh, I want to help people and I want to do that, because it could be, I mean, maybe you don't, or maybe you want to help people but you want to make something of it as well. And I think there's a whole thing of like a lot of people feeling like you shouldn't be over ambitious, or you shouldn't want too much money, or you shouldn't want to, you should be okay with just having enough or whatever. And I always say that money in the hands of good people is only a good thing. And so Yeah, I think stripping back the layers of like what I should be doing versus what do I really want to do. And hey, if that means playing golf 3 times a week, play golf 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Like whatever brings you joy, right?
Makes sense.
Do you want to talk about your relationship?
Go for it.
Is that okay? What is the recurring argument you think that you have when we're talking about bringing things into like the conscious?
Yeah, I don't know if we really have many anymore. We have actually solved quite a lot of it. We get on like quite fine. We'd rarely argue, and if we do, it's like over something like random that 5 minutes later we're like, that was a bit stupid.
Yeah.
Like we have got to quite a good place where like, yeah, we don't really have many issues anymore.
And are there conversations that you feel like you want to have that you feel like you can't, or you're pretty open?
Nah, again, same thing. Like when you were talking about the money thing, like we know exactly where each other's at. We are super open about everything. The family thing, my girlfriend's maybe a little bit further ahead than I am. But apart from that, like there's nothing really that we don't know about each other. Well, even that, we have open conversations about it.
Yeah. And if you do go on to have a family, what do you want the kind of split of emotional labor to look like?
Probably a lot closer to even than is traditional.
Okay.
And that's probably a thing as well, where, as in when I do have kids, like I don't want to be the guy that just goes and works all day, every day and can't, go to my son's football on a Friday night or whatever. And I guess I am sort of working towards that. So yeah, definitely a bit more even than traditional. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess also living in a place like Dubai helps because you can get help for a lot of the things that would otherwise, maybe traditionally fall to a woman to do. But it's also things like remembering birthdays, buying presents, writing cards.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much more to the kind of emotional labor.
Yeah.
Your relationship sounds great. What else do you want to talk about?
Yeah, no, it is. You know what? It probably is. Like we're good at kind of overcoming stuff, and we work together as well. And like we've got separate businesses, but they're quite intertwined. And we've been quite like, I don't know. We just kind of. Tal was very stubborn to begin with when we first kind of got together, and I think her guard went down a bit. And like, I don't know. I'll like what we were saying earlier. Like we're always kind of like why rather than like button heads. It's like well, why is that happening? And I've definitely got a lot more conscious in relationship and in life. Like there's like this is gonna sound fucking mental to people at home, right? And I guess you'll probably understand it. This sounds like I'm a psychopath, but there's a third voice in my head now. Does that make sense?
Totally.
It used to be the devil and the angel, and the devil would be like, let's go and fuck shit up, and then the angel would be like, oh no, my God, we can't do that. And now there's a third voice that goes, right, well, let's all have this sounds so crazy. I can't believe I'm saying this on camera. There's three voices, and we almost like sit down and have a conversation about the three of us, and then we solve it in my head. And is that consciousness?
I think that's being quite aware.
Yeah.
And also, and now I'm gonna sound crazy, like woo, but I do think that universe, source, God, whatever you want to call it, I call it the universe, kind of tells you things you need to hear if you're listening. And so no, I totally hear you with the voices. Like when I left London, for example, everyone was like, but you are London. Like how if the person who loves it the most in the world leaves, like what's going on? And I was like, well, actually a voice told me. And they were like, what? I said, yeah, I kept hearing this voice, and it only got louder, that said everything that you want, Natasha, is on the other side of you leaving London, but you're using it as your comfort blanket. And I was like, so true. Like, I always felt safe there. I knew what I was doing. I was independent. I was in control of my life. It wasn't giving me what I wanted, but it was the place that I could kind of, call home. Yeah. And so for people listening who think we are crazy, I would actually say tap into that, like start listening to what that voice is telling you, because whether it's consciousness or whether it's, I don't know, your soul, I mean, people call it so many different things, but when you can tap into what it's saying, it almost not almost, in my opinion, it never really leads you down the wrong path.
Yeah.
Like, even sometimes when it feels like it's wrong, you're just like, oh no, but all these things are going wrong. I listened to it, now all these things are going wrong. And I truly believe that it kind of removes what's not working for you to take you to the point to find, what is working
Definitely.
for you. So yeah, no, good. It's good that you're
don't get me wrong,
into that.
the devil still wins sometimes. Like, it's not like we always fix it and I don't go and do whatever the bad thing is. I don't, go and eat the cake, or I don't, not get into my ice bath after the gym, or I don't wake up and go to the gym. Like, the devil still wins sometimes. But sometimes as well, the devil is allowed to do it. And I think that's a thing that I never thought would happen, is like, we sit down, we have the conversation, the three of us in my head, and it's like, okay, well, yeah, fair enough. You've done well this week, devil. Yeah. You've accepted a lot of stuff, so you can have this one. I sound crazy now.
No, you know what that is? Being human.
Yeah.
Being human. Like, there's this idea, and again, sometimes you see it on social media, you'll see people who have either lost a lot of weight or are doing big things, and they talk about how they're doing, you've got to have discipline, and you've got to do this, and I'm like, but you are also human. Yeah. And yes, sometimes the devil wins, and, because we want to do things that are crazy, or we want to do things where we feel something, or we want to do things that, we think we're not supposed to do, and I'm like, if that's all just created in your head, then... who's to say who's winning? Like, just do what you need to do.
Makes sense.
And have fun.
100%. Right, okay. What would your advice be to, quote unquote, fix me? What am I missing? What is the thing over here that I can't see that you maybe can from this conversation?
So I would probably need to do like more sessions to go
more
deeper.
Than 10 minutes, come on.
To go deeper into what it is. But I would say, a bit like you said, your life coach already says, I think that you know what it is. I think that you're just scared. I think most people are just scared because it's like, oh, but if I do that, what if this happens? Or if I do that, what, and the funny thing is, a lot of people feel it when they have multiple businesses as well. And I'm not saying this is you, but it could be, like for some people, I remember speaking to someone and they just knew that this one particular business they had 4, wasn't giving them the joy that it should. But it's like, how can I shut it down? I've built it, I've done all this work. And I think whether that's in life or relationships, we equate so much to the past and what we've put into something, that there's this idea, and in friendships as well, there's this idea of longevity, right? So, I've put all this effort into it, like I have to continue. But if it's not making you happy, then, again, I'm not saying that's you, but I think that but maybe you're just afraid of what that might look like.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Right, thank you. This has been great. Where do people keep up to date with you?
I am most active on Instagram, so at Natasha Coaches. On Instagram, I'm also on Substack for those who are readers, Natasha Mahtani, and my website is natashamatani.com.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Natasha. It's been great.
Callum, it was great to speak to you too.